But we've asked Lou to present some data from the state level around some of the issues we've been talking about, racial data, demographic data. So the better part of an hour, Lou will be presenting to us, and then after that, we have Dr. Angel Harris, who will be presenting to us as well. So that's pretty much comprised of. If you would like to stick around, we'll be serving box lunches afterwards as well to give us a chance to fellowship and be able to talk. But I believe at the end of Lou's presentation, he will open it up and we'll be able to have some dialogue, some Q&A around some of the data points that he's presenting. So without further ado.
And if you are tweeting, right, we are continuing to use the hashtag SGXVI, right?
XG, hashtag SG study group XVI, some Roman numerals for 16.
So we all, as part of the conversation, obviously we want to continue to have this dialogue, not just in the room, but as we build toward finding. So thank y'all for that.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's good to see you here on a sunny but cold morning. I have to give you some information up front just so you're aware. I had nasal surgery 2 weeks ago, and so I was out of the office for a good week and a day recuperating from that. This is my first stand-up presentation since surgery. I have been back to the office for 4 days. Getting this presentation pulled together involved a little bit more effort than I thought it would, only because I thought I made the dumb mistake of thinking I'd be able to get work done while I was recuperating. And for those of you that had had any kind of surgery and you're on painkillers for the first few days, there's no work that you should even think about doing. But I'm feeling great. I can breathe much better than I ever have probably in my entire life, and it's wonderful to be here. When James asked me to do this presentation, it was one of those, Lou, can you come and talk about EOG results and EOC results? And I was like, well, I'm not in charge of testing anymore, and maybe I should start with that. With my being in charge of a division called Data Research and Federal Policy, most of the work that I do are things that Dr. June Atkinson, the state superintendent, asks me to head up. So I sort of refer to myself as her utility person. So you'll hear things like a state educator equity plan. So June tapped me to head up pulling that together for the work that I end up doing with the U.S. Department of Education. For things like the reauthorization of NCLB, I serve as June's federal liaison, and I work with federal liaisons across the country. Each state has one federal liaison, so I help us get things like ESEA reauthorized by helping put together materials and talking points and that kind of stuff. So it's a real interesting job. As you all know, NCLB did get reauthorized. It's now the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. And one of the things involved with that is for each state now to put together a new plan around this new federal legislation. And yes, June said, Lou, I want you to head up the team in DPI that's going to help put together the plan. Now, things like the Educator Equity Plan, things like the Every Student Succeeds Act plan, those involve our having to involve external stakeholder groups. And so I'll be part of the team that helps do all of that stuff. So June put me in charge of this new division that she established 4 years ago. For the 15 years prior to that, I was in charge of the statewide testing and accountability program. So for those of you that have been around a while and you remember the old ABC's accountability program, I got hired to be the director of accountability services the 2 months after the General Assembly signed into law that ABC's requirements. So when James asked me to talk about this stuff, I'm always willing to do presentations, and I said, yes, I will. And then while I was out of the office, during that period of the few days of holiday and then the 7 days of sick leave, I read one of his emails that said, now, Lou, we'd like for you to do this and do this and do this and do this. And I just wrote back and I said, James, I will do as much as I can get done, which again involved my having to get staff to do a lot of stuff. So here are the things I am going to talk about. the National Assessment of Education Progress, EOGs, EOCs, ACT, AP, cohort grad rates, suspensions, expulsions, the Educator Equity Plan, a few brief recommendations, and then some references to other things that I think will be useful and helpful to the committee. Hopefully all of you have heard of the National Assessment of Education Progress. It's congressionally mandated. It involves, for us in North Carolina and across the nation, it's a requirement of the old NCLB. It's a requirement of the new legislation as well. And that is the testing of samples of students in all states in reading and math in grades 4 and 8. And there's a lot more I could say about it. Now, this may look like a little bit of an overwhelming slide, but I think, unless you're colorblind, this is relatively easy to comprehend. If you look at me just for a second, maybe a little more than a second, when I talk about NAEP results and how North Carolina performed, I like to talk about it in terms of 3 buckets. The middle bucket is we did as well as the students in the nation. Okay? So that's at least pretty good. I mean, you did as well as and the other bucket would be doing much better, statistically better than the nation. All right, so that's a real good one. So what color would the doing statistically better be? Green. Doing just like the nation, yellow. Doing statistically lower than the nation would be red. All right? So if you now look at this grouping, the big things here are this data for this setup here is based on scale scores. So think of those as the numerical 1 through 100. I'm making this up just for an analogy. 1 through 100 of grades that teachers give students. But then teachers also give A, Bs, and Cs. Well, with NAEP, there's a category called at or above basic, which are levels of performance. And then there's a higher level called at or above proficient. So you're always going to have more students doing at or above basic than you have doing at or above proficient. You see that by the percentages. But again, here's what I just described earlier. Above the nation, same as the nation, below the nation. And then, just to make it more interesting, I threw in these greater than, equal sign, and lower than, as a comparison to how our 2015 data compared with 2013. So when you look at scale scores, in 2015, we're green in both reading and math. Fantastic, statistically better than the nation. In grade 8, red, we're statistically lower. Yellow, we're just like the nation. All right? But you'll notice 2 down arrows here, down the triangles. So that's lower than it was 2 years ago. And then that same concept occurs for looking at or above basic or at or above proficient. So obviously the goal, in my opinion, was want as many greens as possible. Yellows aren't too bad. Reds mean not so good. So that's a little quick one-pager snapshot with a lot of information capturing reading and math performance of our North Carolina students in grades 4 and 8. Now, in terms of our looking at this data disaggregated by race, ethnicity, and overall, I know these are a lot of lines to look at, but you'll notice that this is going back all the way to 2000. And after the passage of No Child Left Behind, it was then a requirement that every 2 years all the states had to do it. It used to be every 4 years, but with No Child Left Behind, every 2 years. And so that's why with 2003, you'll see that it's every 2 years up till this past year of 2015. And you'll see the red and looks like it's kind of greenish are the white and the Asian. And down here, you'll see this lime, which is black, and this one here, which is the American Indian. All right, so without a lot of discussion, Asians and whites at the top, blacks, American Indians near the bottom. The North Carolina overall is the one here, which is more in the middle area. And that gives you the layout. At the top of each of these, it talks about the subject area math, the grade level, grade 4. Now that earlier one was at or above basic. Remember, that's the one where you would expect to have more and more students because you're looking at a lower level basic and above. This is that same data now looking at or above proficient. And not surprisingly, you see the same spread of scores. It's just that everything is now lower because we're looking at a higher standard, at or above proficient. Now we shift to reading, grade 4, and the two top are whites and Asians. The two bottom are black and Native American. Now I'm giving you the heads up that I have 66 slides, which I'm going to try to go over in about 45 minutes, which means I'm going to fly along. But the reason that I can fly along without too much difficulty is because these slides and the stories they tell are pretty much constant as you go from slide to slide. So now we're looking at reading grade 4, top 2, red and dark green, bottom 2, except occasionally here, which is the Hispanic subgroup, bottom 2, blacks and American Indian. Grade 8, at or above basic. And there are some times where you won't see data, like here's an example here. This is for the American Indian subgroup. Remember I mentioned that the NAEP testing is a sample of students. It's usually around 4,500 students at each grades 4 and 8. We have about, I think, 115,000 students in each of those grades. So when they pull these samples, they pull them to try to balance it to measure the same depth and breadth as the state as a whole. When you get to some of the subgroups where we have smaller numbers, sometimes the model can't accommodate the reporting of the data, and that's why for some of these, like this one with the Native American Indians, there are only a certain number of schools in our entire state that have Native Americans, and it becomes a little bit problematic every time the samples are drawn to always be asking those same schools to participate. Sometimes the model can't handle it, and that's why you don't see some data for the other grades. Grade 8, this is the at or above proficient. So again, everything comes lower. Asians and whites, top 2. Native American, the American Indians, and the blacks, the bottom 2. Grade 4, reading, same pattern. Grade 8, reading, at or above proficient, same pattern. And now what I was able to get the staff member to do is to look at the grade 4 math and then break it out race by economically disadvantaged. So ED does not stand for ed, it stands for economically disadvantaged. The students typically we think of as those eligible for free or reduced price lunch. And what you see here is that, and here's the legend up here, oh, these colors are a little bit, that's supposed to be sort of bluish, and then the not eligible is brownish, and I hope that it looks a little bit like that to you in the back. From here at this angle, they almost look the same, but there is a slight difference. So let's look at the not eligible, the brown. The whites have a scale score of 260. Blacks, the scale score of 244. Hispanics, the scale score of 253. Those are the students in the sample not eligible. And then some other important things. Hispanics, 12% are the not eligible. For blacks, 16% not eligible. For whites, 60%. And then when you look at the actual performance of the kids that are eligible, they are economically disadvantaged. The whites, 243. The blacks, 226. The Hispanics, 233. So obviously gaps in performance even when looking just at the kids who are economically disadvantaged.
Lou, if I'm reading this right then, but I'm also seeing even though the total scores are lower, the impact, let's say the impact of poverty on white students is pretty much identical in terms of performance to black students and Hispanic students. Is that right?
Right. Yep. Well, it's almost identical to the black students who are not economically disadvantaged. Yeah. Yep. All right, that's grade 4. Here's grade 8. Same set of differences. Grade 4 reading. Grade 8 reading. Same pattern. Now the staff member broke the data out by students with disabilities, SD. And what you do tend to see here, though, is for students with disabilities, there are still gaps between the eligibles and the not eligibles. There are still gaps across the eligibles and not eligibles across all 3 categories here as well. So that's grade 4 math, grade 8 math, grade 4 reading, grade 8 reading. And just so everyone knows, James will be posting a PDF of this PowerPoint on the group serve. Yes?
Are we looking at national data or North Carolina?
No, this is all North Carolina.
Okay.
All of these slides are North Carolina.
Okay.
Yep. And then broken out by gender. Grade 4 mathematics. Again, the whites, much higher scale scores. Blacks and Hispanics, much lower. Some differences here between the males and the females. In these slides, the right-hand side are the females. Grade 8 by gender. Females doing better for whites, females doing better for blacks. In math, grade 8, males doing better than females for the Hispanics.
Is that a specific year?
Excuse me?
Is that a specific year capture?
All of these are for 2015.
Okay.
Yeah, right up here, NAEP 2015. But again, it is all North Carolina data. In reading, similar patterns. Again, females better for whites, blacks better. Females doing better for black subgroup, and here again, Hispanics, the males doing a little better than the females. Probably not significant. Same pattern again, grade 8 reading. And then this is one where we wanted, I asked for some kind of a slide about English language learners and how they're doing. So this is the group of students in the sample that in grade 4 math have a scale score of 216 for the English language learners. Now, we shouldn't be too surprised that the ELL group is going to have much lower scores because these are students that have not yet mastered English proficiency. So that's understandable, but it does give you some scope of the differences across these categories. You'll notice whenever you do have copies of the PowerPoint that this is saying race and ELL. So it's basically, here are all of the race data for grade 4 math, broken out by race, ethnicity, and then here's data just for ELL students.
Lou, can you go back one slide, back
Sure.
to the gender piece? Maybe two. So on all the slides where they have these categories by gender, within the racial subgroups, I suppose it would be accurate to say that females do better than males. But overall, white males do better than all other females of color and in the other racial subgroups. Because we can just miss that and say, well, just across the board, females do better than males, but that's not quite accurate. It's only in their subgroup.
Right.
So when we look at national studies that talk about girls outnumbering and outperforming boys in advanced courses, the only girls that do that are white girls, and the only boys that they outperform and outnumber are white boys. But white males, as we've seen in all of these, outperform females of color in all of the categories.
Well, I thought there were several categories where the white females are outperforming the males.
They are.
Yeah.
But white males are outperforming females in all of the other racial.
Oh, and all the other, okay, gotcha. Yeah, okay, right, yeah. The other thing I should have mentioned, all of these slides in the lower right-hand corner are numbered. That's always been one of my pet peeves. So if you see something and you note the slide number, we can always go back to it at some point if needed. All right, again, the same patterns. Then when we get to the EOCs, this is to wake you up because this was a different staff member doing these. And, you know, when I saw it, I said, wow, that looks very different than the other stuff. And I said, you know, there will be people who might be getting a little bit tired if they haven't had their second or third cup of coffee, and all of a sudden seeing this would go, wow. This is now our tests. It's not that we're no longer talking about the National Assessment of Education Progress. We're now talking about the North Carolina end of grade tests, the EOGs. And you will see, and I think it does look very colorful, however, this is a compilation of math across all grades 3 through 8, all right? And you will notice that this is talking about the college and career standard. For those of you not familiar with the North Carolina scoring of the EOGs, there's 5 achievement levels. Levels 4 and 5, the top 2 are considered the college and career readiness standards. Level 3 we refer to more as a grade level type proficiency. But for these slides, all we're talking about are the college and career ready standards and percentages of students in the categories broken out by race, ethnicity across grades 3 through 8 in math. And here, again, at the top, Asians, the purplish, the white, the orange, the American Indian, and the yellow, the blacks. Now, what is relatively consistent is these seem to be relatively flat from 2013 through 2015. For those of you that were not around in the 2012-13 school year, that was the first year of these new assessments. These new assessments are much more rigorous than any other prior assessments we've ever had in North Carolina. And the data do indicate the rigor of these assessments. But you'll notice that this pattern on our state-developed tests is still similar to the pattern of our students' performance on the National Assessment of Education Progress. So this is the grades 3 through 8 math, and then this is the 3 through 8 math for the disadvantaged subgroups. And the disadvantaged subgroups are usually considered the limited English proficient students, sometimes referred to as the English language learners, sometimes referred to as the English learners, the economically disadvantaged, and students with disabilities. And you get to see the performance of these subgroups with students with disabilities down near the bottom, followed by the limited English proficient or English learners, followed by the economically disadvantaged. Now this one looks a little bit busy, and if we had had the time, I would have told them to get rid of all of the decimal places. But this is now looking at race and those three different disadvantaged status groups. So American Indian, Asian, Black, Hispanic, two or more races, white, then broken out by those students who are not economically disadvantaged compared with the students who are economically disadvantaged, the not limited and the not LEP compared with the LEP, the not students with disabilities and students with disabilities. And again, you see the patterns of this one here is the American Indian. This one here is the Black. This one here is the white. And the tall one, the Asian. So we see that with the not economically disadvantaged. This is for the economically disadvantaged by race. And again, I'm not going to belabor these, but you obviously see differences. And then we look at reading, similar pattern to what we saw in math. This is by race across grades 3 through 8 for reading. Again, the disadvantaged subgroups. And then the different race and disadvantaged status. And then for science, same pattern. Although here in science, at least we do see more of a upward tick in the slope increases a little bit and doesn't look so horizontal as the others. Folks, I'm just going to go through them because it's pretty much the same. We get to EOCs. So it was the same guy who did the EOGs, and then he decided to do a black and white background to, again, make sure everyone's like, wow, that's different. And that's what we want, because this is now EOCs, end of course. 3 end of course tests, Math 1, Biology, English 2. Here are the groups that are presented, an all students group. Here, Black. Here, American Indian. Same pattern there, same pattern there. The 2 top. Where's Asian? Asian. And the purple, white. ACT. All right, this is a college admissions test. North Carolina's General Assembly required a couple of years ago that all juniors in high school will take the ACT. As you all know, for college placement, a lot of students will take it once in junior year, and then if they don't like their score, they'll take it again, either again in junior year or more than likely take it again in senior year. This is simply the data just based on the students in 3 different years, 2013, 2014, 2015, but it's all based just on the juniors. But what we're doing is we're reporting the percentage of students that scored on the composite score 17 or higher. The reason we chose 17 or higher is that that is the UNC minimum composite score allowed for being admitted as one of the requirements for admission.
And where is the Asian line on there?
Asian is, oh, the Asian is almost right, yeah. Thank you for asking that question, because I'm so thankful that my staff member, when he gave me the slides, said, now, Lou, make sure that you tell them that the Asian is like right behind there. So it's almost very similar to.
Yeah.
All right. But again, you see the Asians and whites, blacks, and the orange American Indian. Go to advanced placement. You all hopefully know the advanced placement of the courses taken in high schools. Students who take advanced placement courses are not required to take the AP exam, but if they want to get the possibility of college credit when they do go to a college, if they go to a college, it's up to the college to decide if they want to give the credit to the student. It's not a guarantee that a student who scores at a 3, 4, or 5 on the AP will be granted college credit when they do go to college. Some colleges might require a 5 before they'll grant the credit. But it's a wonderful thing. Not all students, as I said, are required to take the test. What is nice is the General Assembly now will provide the fee to pay for a student to take it if that student is economically disadvantaged. So that's a relatively new thing that's happened. This is a slide that was just presented to the State Board last week. And it's talking about the recent data on this test. And it makes the point, which I think is important for us to see, that our students saw growth in the 3 major categories in terms of an increase of the exams that were taken. Last year, this is the number of students and increase in the number of exams. So that one should have said students. All right, well, that's what I get for blindly taking a slide and using it. But I think you could figure that out since that says students and that says exams. And a 9, and I sort of wished we didn't use that kind of a dash. These should have had bullets because it almost looks like minus 18.7% or an 18.7% drop. These are all increases. This is all good news, increase of examinees that attend a 3+ score over the last year. And so you see in terms of the exams an increase and in terms of the number of students. This, again, I apologize, it's got a little blurriness to it. This apparently was taken from a report issued by the by the College Board. But you'll see for North Carolina, for black students, compared to last year, a 22.8% increase in the number of exams that were taken by black students, 21.3% increase from Hispanics, and a 25.2% increase for Mexican American. And when you compare those with when it says total group public schools, total group means the nation. The nation's total. That they also, those 3 categories went up, but nothing as dramatic as the increases that we've seen in North Carolina. This is all great news because the data on the advanced placement is that the students who do take the tests have a greater chance of staying in college longer than students who don't either take AP courses or the exam.
That's a 1-year change?
This is, to next. Yep.
Lou, it looks like still in if you look at the percent of total, that even though we've had substantial increases, they're still taking them at much lower rates than the national average. Is that what that's saying?
Tell me.
So for example, if I look at, actually black students, that's the case, but Hispanic students, 7.6% of our AP taking population is Hispanic. Is that what that's saying?
That's what that's saying.
And then in the national average, it looks like they're saying 19%.
Right.
So even though we're increasing, we've got some catching up to do. But it looks like our black students are actually taking it at a higher rate than the national average.
Yes, our black students, good, thank you, Julie. Those are some, here's the dilemma. We could spend 5 minutes or more on every one of these slides. I thought my job would be let you know this data exists, give you some idea of patterns, and then folks can spend as much time as they then want looking at it and trying to piece together some additional things.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Getting at it, that the exam takers versus the exams passed.
Right. So what did you want? What was the question?
So I know there's been an uptick or an
Upticks.
increase, and those that are,
Increase on the students taking it. Right. There's an increase on the students taking it and an increase on the number of exams that are being taken and an increase on the number of students that attained a 3 or higher score.
so I'm looking at that cross-racially, because I was just looking at this in Guilford County last night.
Oh, okay.
33% of African Americans participated in AP courses, but only 10% passed
Right.
the exam. So do you have the exam passing rates on here too?
The exam passing would be the number, well, yeah, here it is right here. So for blacks as a state, 12.7, Hispanics 14.8, and Mexican American 19.
Thank you.
And
So that's a 3 to 5, that's what the
number of grades. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's incorrect.
No, that's correct.
It's the
Yeah,
change.
no. Oh,
That's a change.
these are, right, it's the change in the number. Here's the numbers. These are not percentages. We've got a 3. There were 3,592 blacks who scored a 3, 4, or 5, compared with Asians, where there were 7,350. Where's the
I
whites?
guess if you look out of the 14,000
Well-
there, 3,600 out of the
So
14.
the whites aren't even on this slide, or am I missing it?
Pass rates, yeah, the pass rates.
Again, this is a slide I just took from what went to the state board, and I apologize, I wasn't at the...
calculate that though, pretty quickly. That 14 and 3.
Yeah, so it's probably at the bottom and got chopped off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so here was the last slide that I used from information that went to the state board. So
Yeah.
almost 54% of the AP exam takers scored a 3, 4, or 5. 28.1% for the black examinees scored a 3 or higher. Okay, so there's the question that statewide. 28.1. And you said you had 33% in Guilford?
33% that took the course, but then 10% that passed.
Oh, only 10% that passed. Oh, okay. All right. So this gives you the data statewide on those pass rates of a 3, 4, or 5. 45.5% increase scored 3 or higher for the Hispanic group, and 30.7. And then this just tells you the 36,000 students. In terms of giving you some comparisons, back in 2011, there were only 27,000 students in our state who were taking these AP exams. So we are encouraging more of the populations that historically have not been taking these courses and taking the exams to do so, and so that is a good thing that we are seeing happening in North Carolina. Cohort graduation rates, you all read about these in the paper. This slide covers 2006 all the way up to 2015. It was back in 2006 that we were able to actually report on a 4-year cohort graduation rate. The cohort graduation rate basically looks at students who start in the 9th grade and then what percentage of them graduate in 4 years or less. And you see here from this graph, this top group here, Asian, purple, white, and jockeying and changing a little bit over the last few years, yellow, black, orange American Indian, and the solid blue Hispanic. So this is the clearest picture of how gaps are changing the way we like to see gaps changing. You know, there are ways you change gaps by having your top performers go downhill, your lower level performers going uphill. That changes a gap, but you don't like that kind of a gap change. This is the kind of gap change that we do like to see. Long and short-term suspensions. Oh, whoops. I was going to say, my admin assistant is going to be very embarrassed about that parentheses there. This was all, these slides were finalized late yesterday afternoon. And James, I just kept thinking of you, saying I'm going to get as much of this done as I can, because James will be very upset if I don't.
Oh, is that what you were thinking?
That was his strategy. All right, so here again, the data are there, or will be there in your slides. But what's the phrase? A picture tells picture's better than 1,000 words. So here, for blacks, in terms of number of short-term suspensions, and this is for the this is important, this is for the 13-14 school year, and going back to the 2009-10. The data last school year, 14-15, typically are not presented to the board until March. But you quickly see that in terms of numbers of students, you know, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of blacks, and then you look at whites where it's 80,000 or less. This slide looks at the number of suspensions per 10 enrolled students. And again, that sort of equalizes what you're looking at in terms of just looking at raw numbers. But blacks, much higher. American Indians, second highest, multiracial, third. Asians down at the bottom, whites down near the bottom. And then Pacific Islanders, but again, very few Pacific Islanders in North Carolina. When looking at the short terms by ethnicity and gender, in terms of raw numbers of, this is the one, numbers of suspensions per 10 enrolled students. Males, almost at the 5. It's about 4.5. Now, the other thing, and I should have pointed it out on the other slides, notice that these are all going down. So we are doing a better job as a state in coming up with solutions other than short-term suspensions for students. And there are things like the multi-tiered system of support and other type things that we would like to think are contributing to those types of things. Alfred.
I was just going to ask, has the reporting requirement changed at all? I see the slide.
No, it's just more efforts have been made to work with schools on coming up with strategies to avoid these short-term, long-term suspensions. And then I think pretty soon, and then this is the females. All right, so look at the height of these. These are females by race, ethnicity, and look at the males. So obviously it's more the males that seem to be acting out, doing things that are getting them suspended. You know, folks like to say, oh, it's because of ADHD and all sorts of other stuff. In terms of long-term suspensions, again, the blacks.
Can you go back again?
Sure.
Because it's you know, I'm having that same gender sort of issue. Is that white males and black females seem to have the same suspension sort of experiences. So while if you just look at
no, even for the whites, it's
the white male, but look at white males there.
This is what I'm looking at, yeah.
And then look at females. Look at black females on the next slide.
Yeah,
still suspended
right.
higher rate.
Okay.
So while males are within their group, when you compare them across race, it looks like black females are higher than white males even.
Right. Yes.
And the reports that we've seen, whether it was the Breaking Schools Rules huge report that was done in Texas, is that our efforts are still student-based and not sort of district or school-based in regards to equity. So when white kids do the same things, because white students are more likely to trigger those, commit offenses that trigger, the mandatory offenses that mandate kids should be removed from campus. So white students are more likely to commit those offenses. But black students are more likely to be suspended in the discretionary category. So even when white students do the same thing, misbehave in the same way, they're less likely to face school-based consequences or juvenile justice-based consequences. So if our interventions are just student-based and not the inequity in the way that consequences are handed down, the gap is just gonna get wider.
Okay. Good observations. Okay, so there was the long term. And then long term broken out male, female. You see some differences, but again, for all of these, you are seeing lower numbers of students. And then expulsions, males, females. Look at these, all of these are single digits for females and males, all the way up to a high of 74, but that's back in 2009-10. Expulsions by race, ethnicity. Noticing some upticks here for whites and for blacks in expulsions for the most recent year. All right, Educator Equity Plan. I'm going to do this very fast because I want to make sure Angel also gets a chance to present and have some time. This was required by the feds. We sent the plan in. We had to go through 2 rounds of revisions. We involved a lot of different people in the plan. All of that can be found in the actual plan that is here at this particular website, which is on the DPI website. In that plan, based on input we got from our external stakeholders groups and others, we came up with 17 different strategies. And again, I'm not going to read all of these to you, but these were all strategies covering all the different ways that these external stakeholders and others felt we could do a better job on educator equity if we focused on a lot of these different strategies. And some of these should not be a shock. If we can have more nationally board certified teachers, if we could ensure that we have high quality professional development, we have to figure out ways of improving the performance of low performing schools, better use of technology. I mean, the list goes on and on. This is the one that I think I know I've been hearing this for a long time. Well, if you just report it and people are going to be embarrassed by it, the public reporting. I've come to now think that it's not upsetting as many people as you would think or hope that it would. I didn't have the time to do it, but I know somewhere not far from where my office is a library, and we have results from the California Achievement Test going back to like 1978. And I was tempted to just go and pull a slide on the race ethnicity results from the California Achievement Test going back to 1978, and I'll bet it looks very similar to the distribution that we're still seeing today, which is very frustrating. But here, because of time, I only included two slides of graphs that were in the educator plan that we sent to the U.S. Department of Education. I'll try to explain this as quickly as possible. This is economically disadvantaged students, EDS. Quartile 1, what we did is we took all of the schools in the state, we looked at their percentages of kids that are economically disadvantaged, we rank ordered them, and the bottom quartile are the schools with the lowest percentage of economically disadvantaged. And that turned out to be in that bottom quarter, you could have had as many as 43.4% of your students economically disadvantaged. And that puts you in the bottom 25% of schools in the state. And then the schools that are in the top quarter are pretty close to what you would think, 75% to 100%. But here's what we're looking at. The blue is the percent of teachers that were designated. This is all based on effectiveness data. So it's a combination of test scores plus how students did on the other 5 standards of the teacher evaluation system. So it's capturing more than just test scores, although a lot of teachers get very high marks on standards 1 through 5 compared to what they get for standard 6, which is the EVAS test scores of the teachers. But the bottom line is you see something that I don't think is all that surprising based on all that we know. This is saying that for the schools with the lowest percentages of students that are economically disadvantaged, almost 17% of the teachers were rated highly effective. And when you get to the 4th quartile, only 7.8% of those teachers in those schools with the lowest percentages, bottom 25% of schools, were rated highly effective. And then for the percent of teachers designated as needs improvement, it's a low of 7.64 for the schools with the lowest percentages of economically disadvantaged students, and a high of almost 13% for the schools with the highest percentages. And then we did the same analysis and didn't look at economically disadvantaged. We looked at minority students, and those, I believe, were American Indian, blacks, and Hispanics. And again, we broke up all of the states in the nation, rank ordered them, and then came up with the 4 quarters. So percent of teachers designated as highly effective, 14, almost 14, 15% for the schools with the lowest percentages of minority students, and all the way down to almost 8% for the schools with the highest percentage of minority students. And then for the percent of students designated as needs improvement, a low of 9% and a high of 14%. So the whole purpose of the federal government requiring the states, actually it was in the SEA legislation, to run these type analyses was to find out, are there inequities in certain characteristics or outcomes based on race, ethnicity, and economically disadvantaged status. So that's what we did. I talked with June the day before, I guess it was Tuesday morning, and I said, June, do you want me to come up with some recommendations? What do we do? And so this, I had to say, it's not all of them, but this is June's mantra. Schools need the ability to extend the school days. They need the ability to extend the school year. We have to have better, more preschool education, 11-month contracts, targeted professional development. All of these things we know will require some additional resources. Here is a reference that is really valuable. It's 439 annotated references. I have a staff member, Dr. Vanetta Bell, who has read all 439. She's made a little paragraph comment about those articles, research articles, or books. Dr. Harris has 4 of them listed in this. I think it's 117 pages, but I would recommend that you go and check that out. And here is my contact information, Dr. Bells, and Dr. Tammy Howard. She's the one that now oversees accountability services, EOGs, EOCs, ACT, etc. Folks, that's my presentation, and I guess I went a little bit longer than I wanted, but it was still under an hour.
No, hey, you know what? I appreciate you. Everybody, please give it up. Especially being edited about the thoughts you were thinking about me over break. I appreciate that. But honestly, the information you presented is going to be crucial for our work going forward. So we greatly appreciate you coming through in the clutch, and tell all your staff members, thank you very much. What do you say we take maybe a 3-minute break just to kind of use the restroom really quickly, and then we'll reconvene so Dr. Harris can get set up. Sounds good?
Sounds good.